Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Uttam dhammam sangham namasami. So welcome again, everyone. I hope you had a good meditation. Tonight, I was going to speak about the self. And the self is something that's talked about usually in terms of not self and trying to understand what not self is, and particularly in regards to the five khandhas, which I won't get into detail, but we can briefly understand the five khandhas or the five aggregates as nama rupa. And this is, it's translated as name and form, as well as mentality and materiality. So, so often there's this idea that we just have to get rid of the self. There was I think it was entitled the last the sutta discussion was getting rid of the self, but really to understand the self, and then it's a convention. Nama Rupa is a convention, and that's how we identify ourselves and each other. And so I'm going to start with some reflection, and then a little bit of an introduction to this concept of reflecting on the teachings and what the Buddha had to say about the self, other than non-self. So, and now also I wanted to mention, because our theme for the the winter retreat, excuse me, the theme for the winter retreat has been stream entry, and to understand and let go of what's called Sakkaya Ditthi, or personality view or identity view. There's a number of ways that, and that's it, this concept of self, and particularly in regards to the five aggregates. But before we let go, we need to understand deeply and develop this conventional self. So I'm going to read a quote from Zen master Zogen Zenji. He was a 13th century master, Japanese Zen master. To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. When actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the body and minds of others, drop away. No trace of enlightenment remains, and this no trace continues endlessly. So I started out in the Zen tradition, and I heard this, and I didn't have any real idea how to study myself, or the self, or the concept of self. And so in the Theravada tradition, there is a lot of teachings on that. So we study in terms of nama rupa, as I was saying, and also the five aggregates. And I was saying name and form, or materiality and mentality and materiality. And this is if you look at a picture of somebody, you're seeing a photo of their face or their body or something, and you say, oh, that's such and so. And you say their name, right? So this is the nama rupa is very much identity, and we identify ourselves as our body. We look in the mirror. I'm looking old. I'm old. I see myself, this body, as we're talking about the body being aging, the body being so there's a lot of attachment to the body, and then also our mentality, how we think of things. This is the five aggregates. Get into more detail in the feeling, perception, volition, all formations, and consciousness. So our identity is all wrapped up in all of that. But when we look at closely according to the Buddhist teaching, we see it's all in flux. It's always changing. It's impermanent. It's suffering. It's not self. Eventually, we get to that point where we can see that clearly. But in the meantime, we need to be developing a wholesome sense of self, a compassionate self, a wise self. I have other, yeah, so wise, compassionate, and having love for oneself as well. We have to develop metta for the self, how to care for ourselves well, how to understand and care for ourselves well. This is also in the Buddhist teaching. So then we develop a confidence in the self, confidence for this being, and at that point we're more able to let go of the self. We can't do that without a healthy foundation. If we try to discard an idea of a self when we're not well developed in the Dhamma, we don't have a good metta for oneself, and the metta starting with ourselves for all beings. We don't have that as a foundation, then really trying to kind of discard or get rid of or trample this idea of self is what will happen, more than really the true letting go, the real letting go that can happen when we do this deep study, this deep understanding, this deep development. So I've selected, the title said that it was verses from the Dhammapada, but as I started thinking about this subject, I chose some other verses, not verses, but extracts from suttas, which have verses in them. So this is the first I chose was from the Samyutta Nikaya. And if you want to take notes and look this up later, this is SN 3.8. And this is only an extract. It's not the whole sutta. And it's called Mallika. And some people may know that Mallika is the wife of King Pasenadi. And this is a very sweet sutta. And they're having this conversation. And the king said to the queen, Mallika, is there anyone more dear to you than yourself? Maybe he was hoping she'd say, oh, you, my darling. And she says, no, great king, there isn't. But is there anyone more dear to you than yourself? For me also, Mallika, there is no one more dear. So then the king goes, they're in this long house above where the Lord Buddha is staying with the bhikkhus. And so the king goes to see the Buddha and report what they just had this conversation that he and his beloved Mallika, Queen Mallika, had. And then understanding the matter, on that occasion, the Buddha recited the verse. Having explored every quarter with the mind, one finds no one dearer than oneself. Likewise for others, each holds themselves dear. So one who loves themselves would harm no other. So this is a very powerful statement if you think about it. Even a tiny ant, you can see if you look closely, if you're trying to sweep them up or something, how terrified they seem. I'm going to repeat this, and then I give just a minute for you to reflect on this. Having explored every quarter with the mind, one finds no one dearer than oneself. Likewise for others, each one holds themselves dear. So one who loves themselves would harm no other. One who loves themselves would harm no other. So you could reflect deeply on the meaning of that. If you love yourself well, you would not harm another. Having the understanding how each one of us holds ourselves dear. So the idea of holding yourself dear, this is if it's a healthy way, rather than just selfishly wanting for ourselves, wanting to indulge ourselves or wanting this selfish self-centeredness. It's not about that. And that's why this reflection too about how each one of us equally holds ourselves dear. So I want to read something from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. And this is in the Khuddaka Nikaya. So if you wanted to look this up, it's KP.9. So this is just a very small extract from this. This is, first I'm going to have Bhante Sujato's translation. It's starting out about all beings, reflecting on all beings. May they be happy and safe. This is Sukhi no wa kemi no hontu. May all beings be happy. Sabe sata bhavantu sukhitata. And the sukhitata is sukhita and atta. And this is a reflective pronoun for those who are Pali or grammatical students. And this is reflecting back upon oneself, to be happy within oneself. And
I'm just kidding. No, also, it sounds like it. I mean, that's radical. You changed a lot at once.
Could you please mute yourself? Please. I don't know who's speaking. So this is a Lawrence Cantipalo Mills translation, and I rather like it. He says, may beings all live happily and safe. and may their hearts rejoice within themselves. So may their hearts rejoice within themselves. And when you think about this, all beings, we're not excluded from all beings. We're one of those beings. So if you think about that, this is where the atta is in a wholesome sense, in a Karaniya Metta Sutta, the concept of within oneself rejoicing, and the happiness just coming from within. So I'm going to repeat that and just give you about 30 seconds to really reflect on this translation. May beings all live happily and safe, and may their hearts rejoice within themselves. So now we're coming to the Dhammapada verses, and I just selected a few, and I have Bhante Sujato's translation as well as the Acharya Buddha Rakita. Yes, Rakita. So I'm going to give you, when I read these, I'm going to give you just a little bit of time just to reflect on what's being said here. I've already spoken a bit about these concepts. So just to give you and the verses, if you're interested, it's if you go to the Dhammapada, you'll find it's usually abbreviated as DHP, and it's starting with 157. There's a whole collection of verses about the self. Like it's not a chapter, but it's a section on entitled the self. It's a Attavaga. So, but if you're able to read a verse and just memorize it and hold it in your heart, this is one thing that you can do with verses. A verse particularly that inspires you. So I'm going to try to do this practice by reciting it out loud. And I'll recite maybe more than one translation, and then I'll give you a little bit of time to reflect. So this is the first one by Bhante Sujato. If you'd only love yourself, you'd look after yourself right well. In one of the night's 3 watches, an astute person would remain alert. And this is Acharya Buddharakkhita's translation. If one holds oneself dear, one should diligently watch oneself. Let the wise person keep vigil during any of the 3 watches of the night. I'm going to repeat that just so giving you a little bit more time to take it in. If one holds oneself dear, one should diligently watch oneself. Let the wise person keep vigil during any of the 3 watches of the night. The astute would avoid being corrupted by grounding themselves first of all in what is suitable, and only then instructing others. The astute would avoid being corrupted by grounding themselves first of all in what is suitable, only then instructing others. If one so acts as one instructs, the well-tamed would tame others, for the self is hard to tame, they say. So those were both Bhante Sujato's translation. And these, this is 158, 159 verses. This is verse 160. And I'm going to read both Bhante Sujato's and Acharya Buddharakkhita's. There's a slightly different flavor to both of them, but they're both worth contemplating. Self is indeed the Lord of self, for who else would be one's Lord? When oneself is well tamed, one gains a Lord that is rare indeed. One truly is the protector of oneself. Who else could be the protector be? With oneself fully controlled, one gains a mastery that is hard to gain. So that's all I'm going to share with the Dhammapada verses. But I would encourage you to reflect on these verses like this. Take a look for yourself and maybe even memorize some phrases for yourself that you could think about during the day. This is definitely in line with the practice in the Buddha's teaching to do this kind of reflecting. So I'm going to end with, this is very favorite sutta around Dhamma Dharini. It's one of our favorite suttas. And this is a Sedaka Sutta, and it's in the Samyutta Nikaya. So if you want to find that, it's SN 47.19. And this is just an extract, it's not the whole sutta. But the story goes that the Buddha is speaking to the monk, and he's talking about these two acrobats. And so there was an acrobat and an apprentice, and they were doing this very dangerous kind of stunt where one climbs up a bamboo pole and the other one's holding it on his shoulder or something. So the apprentice goes up and balances on the pole. And so the apprentice, the teacher says, I'll look after you and you'll look after me. And the student says, oh, no, that's not how it should be. I should look after myself and you should look after yourself and we'll both be safe. So then this is the Buddha speaking about what that, he had described this, what had happened. And then he says, that's the method there, the Blessed One said. It's just as the apprentice Meda Katalika said to the teacher, I will protect myself. Bhikkhus, this should be the establishments of mindfulness should be practiced. I will protect others. Bhikkhus, this should be the establishments of mindfulness. Thus should, I'm having a hard time reading because of the lighting. Thus should the establishments of mindfulness be practiced. Protecting oneself because one protects others. Protecting others, one protects oneself. And how is it? Because by protecting others, one protects one. And how is it? Because that one, by protecting oneself, one protects others. By the pursuit development and cultivation of the 4 establishments of mindfulness. It is in such a way that by protecting oneself, one protects others. And how is it, bhikkhus, that by protecting others, one protects oneself? By patience, harmlessness, loving kindness, and sympathy. It is in such a way that by protecting others, one protects oneself. I will protect myself because thus should the establishments of mindfulness be practiced. I will protect others because thus should the establishment of mindfulness be practiced. Protecting oneself, one protects others. Protecting others, one protects oneself. So this is a very beautiful sutta. But so it's caring for ourselves well, and this is caring oneself oneself in the Dhamma, in the training, in the teaching. But this is interesting. Protecting others, we protect ourselves. So by patience, harmlessness, loving kindness, and sympathy. So these are related to the Brahma Viharas. And by I will protect others. Protecting oneself, one protects others. Protecting others, one protects oneself. So it goes in both directions. So this may be something to reflect on too. You could just reflect on the idea of how actually when you're patient, you're practicing patience, harmlessness, loving kindness, and sympathy. You're protecting others and protecting yourself. And then the development of the 4 establishments of mindfulness. One protects others and one protects oneself. So said I would leave some time for some sharing or some questions. So we could open this up for a little discussion. So you can put up a virtual hand if you would like to say something related to what was just shared by us here. So Richard has a hand. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ayya. The way I look at that, developing mindfulness in both cases, protecting oneself is also protecting others. If you want to engage in some kind of sensual activity with others, you are actually binding them to endless samsara of birth and death. So this is why you're actually looking out for them by developing your own mindfulness so that your mind won't stray in those directions. And you're therefore leaving them free, to themselves, if they want to go in that direction, to, free themselves from samsara. I think a good example of this is Buddha gives the example of he says, a sensual desire has arisen in me. This desire is not good for myself. It's not good for all others. It's not good for any of us. And so that's pointing out that your desires bind other in this sense, right, of personal interaction, bind others, to this world. So anyways, but that's all I wanted to say. That's just kind of the way I look at that. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Richard. That's a good point. I think in the Dvaita Vitaka Sutta, he talks about seeing the harm, the unwholesome, like you're saying, that if lust is arising, it would be harmful to himself and to others. So he saw the danger. So I think that's what you're talking about. Thank you. So that's a protection, definitely. Anyone else? Anyone in the room have a question or comment? I hope that the reflections were helpful. This practice of reflection.
I think it's very difficult to do.
Do you want to come and speak into the mic? I don't know do you want to say your name?
This is Patipada. Living in the world as a lay person and having lots of different relationships and having this conditioned mind with all of the education and years of experience we have makes this quite challenging, because it's difficult, first of all, to have the right view of the form, the nama rupa, for what it is. We see it for what we were conditioned to see it. And that conditioning creates all of the complexities and misunderstanding when we communicate with each other. And just that one deep root creates all of the mishaps and suffering in our life. Because we may want something from someone else we have a relationship with, but if that person doesn't want the same thing, then now you have to negotiate. So if I'm living by myself and I'm on my own, I can actually not speak to most people. Just go about living my life. But that's not it. It's about how I'm looking at myself. So loving oneself, I find, is not unconditional, because I have too many criticisms about myself.
Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, it just goes back to what we're saying in the beginning, how we can't let go of our conditioning and our everything, like without really developing this self-love. And this is a gradual path. And the true self-love is not indulging, like, but it's more like this gradual development that we're doing. It's so we're developing patience. What did it say? Patience, sympathy,
harmlessness.
loving, harmlessness. Okay, so apply all that to oneself. Harmlessness, patience, and loving kindness. And forgive. A lot of it is forgiving, but just it's just reminding ourselves again and again. This is lifetimes of conditioning. Lifetimes of conditioning. And not everybody has to be celibate. There were stream enterers that were still married. There's some that were married and they started a celibate life. But to give up all attachment isn't mandatory, like just, off the bat. So this is why there's this in the suttas there is this discussion of the self in various ways, not just letting go of self. That doesn't come until we're really well developed, and so we can't expect more from ourselves than we're capable of. So there's a sila, the ethical conduct, developing right, gradually developing right view, and which includes this kindness to others, which is the keeping at least 5 precepts, and just understanding a little bit about cause and effect, like seeing how if I'm kind to others and kind to myself, there's more happiness in the world. There's, so it's not just off the bat that we can suddenly let go. And that's what I was trying to, I don't know, it's hard to really explain that well, maybe, but it's a gradual path.
When I ponder, what comes up for me is the difficulties of doing.
Well, this is why I'm trying to encourage people, just look at the verses. Just take one verse and something that stands out will maybe be helpful to you, and just kind of let go of all that. This is a thing with loving oneself. We try to see, okay, is this self-criticism or demanding from myself more than I can? Is that helpful or is it harmful? Can I let go of that? I don't have to let go of the self off the bat, but can I let go of that high expectation of myself that I'll never meet, or I can't meet right now? Can I let go of that? Sure. Is there anyone else that has something to share? So we don't have anything to share. I mean, if no one else has anything to share, see, we could just end with one of the verses. So I'll just select one from the Dhammapada. If one holds oneself dear, one should diligently watch over oneself. Let the wise keep vigil during any of the 3 watches of the night. This is 3 phases of life is how I heard it understood, but holding yourself dear, you should diligently watch over yourself. So we can close here. Araham Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivadin Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sangham Namo. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Ayya.